The stars burned red across the Meridian Gate. Admiral Quan Taesung stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with cold eyes. 300 years of war, and the galaxy was losing. The Voctor swarm had consumed 14 star systems in the past month alone. Now they were here, at humanity's last defensive line. "Admiral, the Kelran fleet is breaking formation," his tactical officer reported. Quan said nothing. He had expected this. The Kelrans were the oldest species in the coalition. They had fought for 3 centuries. They were tired. "Let them go," Quan said quietly. On the view screen, the elegant Kelran vessels turned away from the battle line. They were retreating to their homeworld, to surrender or die there. Quan understood. He did not blame them. "The Torvan ships are requesting permission to withdraw," another officer called out. Quan nodded. The Torvans had lost their homeworld last year. They had nothing left to fight for except survival. Within an hour, only the human fleet remained. 43 ships against a swarm that numbered in the thousands. Quan looked around his bridge. Young faces stared back at him. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 70 years ago. They were children compared to the ancient species that were now fleeing. "Sir, we should fall back to Sol System," his second-in-command suggested. Commander Park Hannah was young, barely 30, but she had a brilliant mind. Quan had read her weapons research papers. They were revolutionary and terrifying. "Agreed," Quan said. "All ships, begin retreat protocol. We make our stand at home." The Voctor did not pursue immediately. They never did. They consumed everything in their path first, like locusts stripping a field bare. The human fleet had 3 days, maybe 4, before the swarm reached Earth. Back in Sol System, Earth's orbital stations buzzed with desperate activity. Every shipyard worked day and night. Every factory had been converted to military production. Quan stood in a strategy meeting with the human government leaders. The room was tense. "The other species have abandoned us," the Earth Chancellor said. She was an old woman, gray-haired and tired. "They say humanity is doomed. They say we should surrender while we still can." "Surrender to what?" Quan asked. "The Voctor don't take prisoners. They consume. They digest. They move on. There is no mercy in the swarm." Park Hannah stepped forward. She carried a data tablet, her hands shaking slightly. "I have a proposal," she said. "Project Reaper. The Coalition banned this technology 20 years ago. They said it was too dangerous, too inhumane." She activated the holographic display. A fighter design appeared, sleek and deadly. Neural interface combat systems. The pilot's mind connects directly to the ship. Reaction time becomes instant. Targeting becomes instinctive. But the other species can't use it. Their biology rejects the interface. It kills them. "And humans?" the Chancellor asked. "Humans can survive it," Park Hannah said. "Most of them. We estimate 60% survival rate in initial tests." The room fell silent. 60% meant 40% would die just from using the system. Quan studied the design. It was brilliant. It was horrible. It might be humanity's only chance. "I'll authorize it," Quan said. "We need volunteers." "I'll fly it," a voice said from the back of the room. Lieutenant Yoon Dae-ho stepped forward. He was one of humanity's best pilots, known for taking insane risks that somehow worked. "If this thing can kill the swarm, I'll fly it." Others volunteered. Too many others. Park Hannah looked sick as she watched young pilots raise their hands, knowing she might be sending them to their deaths. That night, Quan met with his intelligence officer, Captain Lee Minji. She was a quiet woman who spoke 14 alien languages and had studied xenobiology for years. She had a theory. The Voctor communicate through a quantum frequency, Li Minji explained. "I've been studying the captured specimens. If we can disrupt that frequency, we might be able to confuse them, maybe even hurt them. Can you do it?" Quan asked. "Give me time," she said. "And more specimens." Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Voctor swarm arrived at the edge of Sol System 2 days later. The human fleet moved to intercept at Jupiter's orbit. 43 ships against thousands. The odds were impossible. Quan stood on his bridge as the swarm approached. The Voctor ships were organic, grown rather than built. They looked like enormous insects, all chitin and mandibles. Behind them came the smaller drones, millions of them, blotting out the stars. "All ships, hold the line," Quan ordered. His voice was calm. "Remember what we're fighting for. Behind us is Earth. Behind us is humanity. Behind us is everything we love. The galaxy may have given up, but we haven't. We will never surrender." The first weapons fired. Missiles streaked across space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. The Battle of Jupiter began, and humanity fought like cornered animals. Because that's exactly what they were. The galaxy had abandoned them. The ancient species had fled. Humanity stood alone against extinction, but humans had one advantage the other species had forgotten. Humans knew how to fight when there was no hope left. Humans knew how to rage against the dying of the light. And humans, more than any other species in the galaxy, refused to accept the impossible. The Battle of Jupiter lasted 6 hours. When it ended, humanity had lost 19 ships. The Voctor lost hundreds, but hundreds meant nothing to a swarm of thousands. Quan ordered the fleet to fall back to Mars orbit. They needed time. Time to prepare. Time for Park Hana's Reaper fighters to be ready. Earth's moon had been converted into a massive weapons facility. Park Hana worked without sleep, supervising the construction of the first Reaper squadron. 12 fighters. 12 pilots. 12 chances to prove her theory worked. Yoon Dae-ho was the first to enter the neural interface chamber. Park Hana watched through the observation window as technicians attached the connection nodes to his skull. She felt sick. This was her design. Her responsibility. "Ready when you are, Doc," Yoon said through the intercom. He was smiling. How could he smile? The interface activated. Yoon's body went rigid as his nervous system connected to the fighter's core computer. His brain waves spiked on the monitors. Park Hana's hands gripped the console so hard, her knuckles turned white. The readings were chaotic for 30 seconds. Then they stabilized. Yoon's eyes opened. They glowed faintly blue from the neural connection. "Whoa," he whispered. "I can feel everything. The ship is like my own body. I can sense the weapons, the engines, the shields. It's all just part of me." Park Hana exhaled. One success. 11 more to go. Not all survived. 3 pilots died in the interface process. Their brains couldn't handle the connection. Park Hana watched each death and forced herself not to look away. This was the price of survival. This was war. Meanwhile, Li Minji worked in a sealed laboratory with captured Voctor specimens. The creatures were small drones, each the size of a dog, but they never stopped trying to break free. Their mandibles clicked against the containment field constantly. Li Minji had discovered something important. The Voctor weren't mindless. They were connected to a hive intelligence, but individually, they showed signs of basic reasoning. And their communication frequency was vulnerable. She created a jamming device and tested it on one specimen. The creature immediately went wild, thrashing and screeching. It lost all coordination. When she activated a second jammer, the specimen collapsed completely, twitching. "I need to show this to the Admiral," she said to her assistant. Quan reviewed her findings with interest. "Can we build these jammers on a large scale?" "Yes," Li Minji said. But we'll need resources. Lots of them. And the effect might be temporary. The swarm could adapt. Do it anyway, Quan ordered. Every advantage matters. 3 days later, the Vector swarm reached Mars orbit. Quan's fleet was ready. 24 remaining ships, plus the 8 surviving Reaper fighters. The odds were still impossible, but now humanity had new weapons. Reaper Squadron, you are clear to engage. Quan transmitted. Yun led his squadron into the swarm. The difference was immediate and shocking. The Reaper fighters moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They dodged incoming fire with impossible precision. Their weapons found targets with perfect accuracy. Yun's mind worked at computer speed, processing battlefield data faster than any normal pilot could. He destroyed 12 Vector drones in the first minute. His squadron accounted for 50 more. The swarm tried to adapt, but the Reaper pilots were too fast, too precise. For the first time in 300 years, the Vector were being outfought. Then Li Minji activated her jamming network. Satellites hidden throughout Mars orbit began broadcasting the disruption frequency. Entire sections of the swarm suddenly lost coordination. Drones collided with each other. The larger hive ships struggled to direct their forces. All ships, press the attack, Quan ordered. The human fleet surged forward. They focused fire on the confused sections of the swarm, punching holes in the enemy formation. Explosions lit up space like new stars. For 6 hours, humanity drove the Vector back, but the swarm was learning. The jamming became less effective as the hive mind adapted. And the cost was terrible. 4 more human ships were destroyed. 2 Reaper pilots died when their fighters were overwhelmed. Yun survived, but barely. His fighter returned to the carrier with half its hull missing. Park Hannah met him in the medical bay. The neural interface had pushed his body to its limits. He was bleeding from his nose and ears. But he was grinning. "We hurt them," he said. "Did you see? We actually heard them." Quan called an emergency meeting. Earth's government leaders joined via secure transmission. The mood was different now. They had won a battle. Just one battle. But it was more than the galaxy had achieved in decades. "We need to take the offensive," Quan said. "The swarm expects us to defend. We need to attack their territory, hit their supply lines, destroy their hive ships before they can rebuild." "That's suicide," the Earth Chancellor said. "We barely survived this battle." "Defending is suicide," Quan replied. "Just slower. The swarm has unlimited numbers. We don't. Every battle we fight on the defensive costs us ships we can't replace. But if we attack, we choose the battlefield. We choose the terms." Park Hannah spoke up. "I can upgrade the Reaper systems, reduce the mortality rate, build more fighters. Give me 2 weeks. I can refine the jamming technology," Li Minji added. "Make it adaptive so the swarm can't counter it as easily." The Chancellor looked at the data. She looked at the casualty reports. She looked at the images of Earth, beautiful and blue, hanging in space behind them. "Do it," she said. "Authorize Operation Wildfire. We take the fight to them." That night, Quan stood alone in his quarters, looking at old photographs. His family had died when the war reached human space. He had nothing left except duty and revenge. But maybe that was enough. Earth's factories worked overtime. Every resource was directed to the war effort. Civilians volunteered for military service in record numbers. Humanity had seen what the Vector were. They had felt the terror of near extinction. Now they felt something else. Anger. The galaxy watched from afar. The species that had abandoned humanity monitored the Battle of Mars with surprise. How were these young upstarts surviving? How were they fighting back? The Kellan sent a covert message offering limited intelligence support. The Torvans shipped medical supplies in unmarked vessels, No one wanted to commit fully, but everyone was watching. And deep in the darkness between stars, humanity prepared to do the unthinkable. They were going to invade Vokter territory. The human fleet assembled beyond Saturn's orbit. 15 ships remained from the original force. 20 new vessels have been constructed in Earth's orbital yards, built with desperate speed and Park Hanna's upgraded weapon systems. The Reaper fighter wing now numbered 32 pilots. The mortality rate during neural interface had dropped to 12%. Still terrible. Still necessary. Quan studied the holographic star map in his ready room. The Vokter held 19 systems in this sector. His target was the Broken Sky system, 3 jumps from Sol. Intelligence suggested it was a major staging ground for the swarm's expansion. Li Minji had identified 6 hive clusters in the system. Destroying them would cripple Vokter operations for months. It's madness, his tactical officer said. We'll be surrounded. No retreat possible. No retreat possible. That's the point, Quan replied. The Vokter expect us to defend. They expect us to be predictable. We're going to be insane instead. Yoon Dae-ho entered the briefing room. He walked with a slight limp now, a permanent gift from his neural interface injuries. But his eyes were sharp, and his hands were steady. Reaper Squadron is ready, sir. All pilots checked out. We're good to go. Park Hanna followed him in. She looked exhausted. She had been working non-stop for weeks, upgrading weapons, improving systems, trying to give humanity any edge possible. I've installed the Hellfire missiles on your flagship, she told Quan. They're experimental. They use a star's own gravity and radiation against it. If you target a star with these, you can create a solar flare massive enough to sweep through an entire system. How massive? Quan asked. Massive enough to sterilize everything in orbit, Park Hanna said quietly. It's a weapon of last resort. I'm not sure we should even use it. We'll use whatever we need to, Quan said. He didn't like it either. The war didn't care about preferences. Li Minji was the last to arrive. She carried a portable jamming device. This is the new model. It cycles through 17 different disruption frequencies. The swarm can't adapt fast enough. We can deploy these from drones. Spread them throughout the battlefield. The fleet jumped to Broken Sky system 4 hours later. The transition from faster-than-light travel always felt like falling. When the stars stabilized, Quan found himself looking at a system full of enemies. Vokter ships swarmed around 5 planets. The 6th planet was nothing but debris. They had already consumed it. Deploy jamming drones, Quan ordered. Reaper Squadron, clear us a path. All other ships, Formation Delta. We're going straight for the largest hive cluster. The jamming drones scattered across the system, each broadcasting Li Minji's disruption signal. The effect was immediate. Vokter formations broke apart. Drones flew into each other. The hive ships struggled to coordinate their swarms. Yoon led his squadron into the chaos. The Reaper fighters were death itself. They moved through enemy formations like knives, cutting down drones by the dozens. Yoon's neural interface let him process information faster than any computer. He saw patterns in the swarm's movements. He found weaknesses and exploited them without thinking. The main fleet followed, weapons blazing. Human ships didn't fight like the elegant coalition vessels. They fought dirty. They used asteroids as cover. They detonated fuel pods as improvised bombs. They rammed smaller Vokter ships when ammunition ran low. A Kelran observer, watching from a stealth probe at the edge of the system, transmitted a report back to his government. The humans fight without honor, he said. They use tactics we would never consider. They sacrifice their own ships without hesitation. They are brutal, efficient, and absolutely terrifying. The battle raged for 8 hours. Quan's flagship led the assault on the largest hive cluster. The structure was enormous, a living city in space, made of organic material and housing millions of Voctor drones. It needed to die. Target the core structure, Quan ordered. All weapons. Concentrated fire. The human fleet poured everything they had into the hive cluster. Missiles, railgun rounds, plasma beams, kinetic kill vehicles. The structure began to break apart. Atmosphere vented into space. Pieces of the organic shell drifted away, burning. But the cost was high. 3 human ships were destroyed. 5 more were badly damaged. And the Voctor were adapting to the jamming signals faster than Li Minji had predicted. The swarm was learning. "Sir, we need to withdraw," his tactical officer urged. "We've taken too much damage." "Negative," Quan said. "We destroy all 6 clusters or this mission fails. Reaper Squadron, I need you to hit the next target." Yoon's voice came through, steady despite the strain. "Copy that, Admiral. We're on it." The Reaper fighters broke off from the main battle and raced toward the second hive cluster. They moved so fast the Voctor couldn't track them properly. Yoon fired his weapons in patterns that seemed random, but were actually calculated to create cascading explosions through the cluster's structure. One by one, the hive clusters fell. The human fleet paid for each victory in blood and metal. By the time the 6th cluster exploded, Quan had lost 7 ships and 14 Reaper pilots. But the broken sky system belonged to humanity now. The surviving Voctor fled. They actually fled. In 300 years of war, no one had ever seen the swarm retreat before. They always fought to the last drone. But the humans had broken something in their collective mind. They had shown the swarm what fear felt like. News of the victory spread across the galaxy. The species that had abandoned Earth watched in shock. How had humanity done this? How had these newcomers achieved what 3 centuries of coalition warfare could not? The Torvins sent an official message. "We were wrong to leave. If humanity will accept our return, we will fight beside them." The Kelrans were more cautious, but they too reached out. Other species followed. Not all of them. Some were too broken, too afraid. But enough responded that Quan suddenly found himself coordinating not just a human fleet, but the beginnings of a new alliance. Park Hannah worked with alien engineers, sharing her weapon designs. They were horrified by the Reaper system, but they couldn't deny its effectiveness. Li Minji taught xenolinguists from a dozen species how to analyze Voctor communication patterns. Earth's Chancellor addressed the Reform Coalition via quantum transmission. "We didn't want to fight alone," she said. "We wanted allies, partners, friends. You left us to die. We survived anyway. Now you want to return. Fine. But understand this, we fight our way now. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. We don't accept defeat. If you can't handle that, stay home." Many species couldn't handle it. Human warfare was too brutal, too desperate, too willing to sacrifice. But those that remained formed a harder, meaner coalition than had ever existed before. Quan planned the next offensive from his flagship. Now in orbit around Earth, the Voctor held 18 systems. He would take them all, one by one, no matter the cost. Because humanity had learned something important in their desperate fight for survival. Sometimes, the only way to win is to refuse to lose. 6 months after the Broken Sky victory, humanity's war machine had grown beyond recognition. Earth's orbital space was filled with shipyards. Every moon in the Sol system had been converted to industrial production. The reformed coalition contributed resources, but everyone understood who led this war now. Humans did. Quan stood in the command center on Earth's moon, studying the latest intelligence. Li Minji had made a breakthrough. She had mapped the Voctor's primary communication network. There was a nexus, a central hub that coordinated swarm operations across multiple sectors. It was located in the Ashara system, deep in Vector-controlled space. If we destroy the Nexus, we could cripple their entire command structure, Li Minji explained. She pointed to the holographic display showing the system. But it's heavily defended. 7 hive clusters, 3 planet-sized breeding grounds, and at least 10,000 combat drones at any given time. Then we'll need more than 10,000 ways to kill them. Quan said. Park Hannah had been working on something new. She called it Project Hellstorm. The weapon was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Human ships would use gas giants as weapons. They would destabilize the atmospheric pressure, then ignite the gases with precisely targeted fusion missiles. The explosion would be powerful enough to destroy everything in the inner system. It's never been tested at full scale, Park Hannah warned. The calculations are sound, but we're talking about turning a planet into a bomb. If we miscalculate, we could trigger a chain reaction that destroys our own fleet. Life is risk, Quan said. Death is certainty if we do nothing. We use it. The assault fleet gathered at the edge of Vector space. 67 ships, 80 Reaper fighters, 5,000 crew members who knew they might not return. The Torvins contributed 12 vessels. The Kauran sent 8. Other species provided support ships, medical frigates, and intelligence platforms. But the core of the fleet was human. The tactics were human. The willingness to do whatever necessary was entirely human. Yoon Dae-ho had been promoted to wing commander. Half his face was now cybernetic, a result of neural interface damage that couldn't be fully repaired. He looked like something from a nightmare, half man and half machine. His Reaper pilots called him Ghost because he had died twice on the operating table and come back both times. All pilots ready, Yoon reported. His voice had a slight electronic echo now. We've practiced the assault pattern 100 times. We know what to do. The fleet jumped to the Ashara system. Reality twisted, and suddenly, they were surrounded by enemies. The Vector had been waiting. They knew the humans were coming. The swarm had learned to anticipate. They're adapting, Li Minji said from her station. They're jamming our jammers. They predicted our tactics. Then we improvise, Quan said calmly. All ships, execute pattern Omega. Reaper wing, go weapons free. Show them what chaos looks like. Pattern Omega wasn't a formation. It was organized madness. Every human ship became an independent unit, free to engage targets of opportunity. No coordination. No predictable movements. Pure aggression. The Reaper fighters scattered into the swarm like wolves into a flock. Yoon led his wings straight at the nearest hive cluster, dodging incoming fire with movements that seemed impossible. His neural interface screamed warnings directly into his brain, but he had learned to filter the pain. Fear was just data now. He targeted the cluster's communication nodes with surgical precision. Without coordination, the Vector drones became confused. They fired on each other. They flew into debris. The swarm's greatest strength, their hive mind, became their weakness when that mind was fractured. The main fleet pushed toward the gas giant Park Hannah had designated as the primary target. The planet was enormous, 3 times the size of Jupiter. Its atmosphere was mostly hydrogen and methane. Perfect fuel for the biggest explosion humanity had ever created. Deploying atmospheric destabilizers, Park Hannah reported. Her hand shook as she worked. This weapon scared her. It scared everyone. But fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. The destabilizers were dropped into the gas giant's atmosphere. They fell for hours, adjusting their trajectory, diving toward the planet's core. When they reached the critical depth, they would begin their work. Meanwhile, the battle raged. Human ships took terrible damage. The Torvin frigate Daybreak was torn apart by Vector plasma fire. A Kalman cruiser lost its entire port side. 3 human destroyers were disabled and had to be abandoned. But the Vokta were losing worse. The humans fought with a desperation the swarm couldn't match. Every human in that fleet knew they were fighting for Earth, for survival, for the right to exist. The Vokta were just following programming. Desperation beats programming every time. Yoon's wing destroyed 2 hive clusters before the swarm adapted to their tactics. Then it became a grinding battle of attrition. Reaper pilots died. Their fighters exploded in brilliant flashes. Yoon watched his squadron shrink from 80 to 60 to 40. Each death hurt, but he couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. Had to keep fighting. Destabilizers at critical depth, Park Hannah announced. Atmospheric pressure reaching collapse point. Prepare for ignition. Kwon gave the order. All ships, retreat to safe distance. Maximum burn. Get clear. The fleet pulled back. The Vokta pursued, sensing weakness. They were wrong. This wasn't a retreat. It was survival instinct. Park Hannah triggered the fusion missiles. They entered the gas giant's atmosphere and detonated in a precisely calculated pattern. The unstable atmospheric pressure collapsed inward, then exploded outward. The planet didn't just explode. It became a temporary star. The blast wave expanded at a significant fraction of light speed. Everything in the inner system was incinerated. The 3 breeding grounds vanished. The 7 hive clusters were vaporized. Thousands of Vokta ships simply ceased to exist. The human fleet, barely outside the blast radius, was hammered by radiation and debris. Ships that had been damaged further broke apart. But they survived. Most of them died when the sensors cleared. The Ashara system was a graveyard. The Vokta nexus was gone. Billions of drones had lost their connection to the hive mind. They drifted in space, inert and lifeless. Nexus destroyed, Lee Minji confirmed. Her voice was shaking. We did it. We actually did it. But the victory was costly. 18 ships lost. 43 Reaper pilots dead. Thousands of crew members killed or wounded. Yoon floated in his damaged fighter, watching bodies drift past his canopy. They had won, but the price was written in blood. Kwon broadcast to the fleet. Today we broke the swarm's back. Today we proved that humanity will not die quietly. Today we showed the galaxy what we are. We are survivors. We are warriors. We are the ones who fight when all hope is gone. Remember the fallen. Honor them by finishing what they started. News of the Ashara victory spread across the galaxy within days. The Vokta were in retreat. Systems they had held for decades were suddenly vulnerable. The Reform Coalition launched coordinated assaults, reclaiming lost territory. But humanity pushed deeper than anyone else. Kwon didn't just want to reclaim systems. He wanted to find the Vokta homeworld. He wanted to end this war permanently. Park Hannah worked on the next generation of weapons. Darker weapons. Weapons that could kill planets. She didn't sleep well anymore. Neither did Kwon. Neither did anyone who understood what they were becoming. Lee Minji made a disturbing discovery while analyzing captured Vokta data. The swarm hadn't always been hostile. Ancient records suggested they were once peaceful. Something had changed them. Something had made them into the consuming nightmare they were now. She brought her findings to Kwon. He read them in silence. Then he looked at her. "Does it matter?" he asked. "They're trying to kill us. We kill them first. That's war." "It might matter," Lee Minji said. "If we understand what changed them, we might be able to stop them without genocide." "Genocide is what they're attempting against us," Kwon replied. "We're just better at it than they are." The conversation haunted both of them, because they both knew the truth. Humanity was winning this war by becoming the very thing they feared, monsters. But sometimes, To defeat a monster, you had to become something worse. The war reached its final phase 18 months after humanity's first stand at Jupiter. The Voktar homeworld had been located in a system the humans called Terminus. It was protected by defenses that made every previous battle look like a skirmish. 50 hive clusters, 100 breeding grounds, millions upon millions of combat drones. And at the center, the original hive, the birthplace of the swarm itself. Quan gathered his war council one last time. Park Hannah sat across from him, looking older than her years. The weapons she had created haunted her dreams. Li Minji was there, along with Yoon Dae-ho, now more machine than man but still the best pilot humanity had ever produced. "I've finished the Star Killer," Park Hannah said quietly. She placed a data chip on the table. "One weapon. We target the system's sun. It will go supernova. Everything within 5 light years will be destroyed. The Voktar, their homeworld, everything." The room fell silent. This was the final weapon. The ultimate solution. Total extinction of an entire species. "I've also finished my research," Li Minji said. She activated a holographic display. The Voktar were peaceful once. They were explorers, scientists. Then they encountered another species called the Devourers. The Devourers attacked them, tried to wipe them out. The Voktar responded by weaponizing their hive mind. They became what they needed to survive. They became the swarm. "So they're victims?" Yoon asked. His electronic voice was flat. "They've killed billions. They tried to destroy us. And we're supposed to feel sorry for them?" "I'm not saying that," Li Minji replied. "I'm saying there might be another way. If I can reach the original hive's core intelligence, I might be able to communicate, negotiate, and this without genocide. Or they'll kill you and keep attacking," Quan said. "The risk is too high. The risk of becoming genocidal monsters is also too high," Li Minji countered. "If we destroy their homeworld, wipe out their entire species, what does that make us? We'll have become worse than them." Quan stood and walked to the viewport. Earth hung in space behind them, beautiful and scarred. Humanity had survived, but at such cost. They had become hard, mean, efficient killers. Was this what survival required? Was this what they had to be? "We assault Terminus in 3 days," Quan said finally. "We deploy the Star Killer as insurance. But Captain Lee will have her chance. If she can communicate with the original hive, if she can find a way to end this without total war, we take it. If not, we use the weapon." "Agreed?" Park Hannah nodded slowly. Yoon said nothing, but his silence was consent. Li Minji looked relieved and terrified at the same time. The assault fleet was the largest humanity had ever assembled. 112 ships, 200 Reaper fighters. The entire reformed coalition contributed forces. Even species that had fled at the war's beginning returned, shamed by humanity's courage. The jump to Terminus was like falling into hell. The system was full of enemies. The star itself seemed to pulse with malevolent light. The Voktar had turned their home into a fortress. "Deploy all forces," Quan ordered. "Reaper Wing, you know your targets. Fleet Formation Alpha. Captain Lee, you have your transport ready?" "Yes, sir," Li Minji said. She would pilot a small stealth craft directly to the original hive. It was suicide, probably. But she had to try. The battle began. It was the largest, bloodiest engagement of the entire war. Human ships fought with desperate fury. The Reaper fighters carved through enemy formations. Yoon led his wing on an impossible assault straight through the heart of the swarm, targeting the largest hive clusters. His fighter took hit after it. Alarms screamed in his neural interface. His cybernetic systems were failing. But he kept fighting, kept firing, kept pushing forward. Because that's what humans did. They pushed forward when any sane species would retreat. Li Minji's stealth craft slipped through the chaos. She flew between battles, using debris as cover. The original hive loomed ahead, a structure so massive it had its own gravity. It was beautiful in a horrible way, all organic curves and pulsing membranes. She landed in what she hoped was a docking port. The structure's atmosphere was breathable, barely. She wore a light suit and carried a translation device loaded with every language she knew, every communication protocol she had developed. The inside of the original hive was like a nightmare made flesh. Walls pulsed. The floor was soft and warm. And at the center, she found it, the core intelligence. It wasn't a creature. It was a network of neural tissue spread throughout the structure. A living computer made of biological material. Li Minji activated her translation device. "I am Captain Li Minji of humanity. I request communication." The response came not in words, but in images projected directly into her mind. She saw the Voctor's history, their peaceful past, the Devourer's attack, the desperate transformation, the endless hunger that wasn't really hunger, but defense. They consumed because they feared being consumed. They attacked because they couldn't risk being attacked first. She sent her own images. Earth, humanity's history, their wars, their suffering, their determination to survive. And she sent something else. A question. Can we stop? The original hive processed this. The communication took minutes that felt like hours. Outside, the battle raged. Human ships were dying. Voctor drones were falling by the thousands. And at the edge of the system, Park Hana's Starkiller weapon was armed and ready. Finally, the original hive responded. It showed her the Voctor's greatest fear. Being alone. Being the last. Being extinct. They had become monsters to avoid extinction. Just like humanity was becoming monsters now for the same reason. Li Minji sent one final message. A proposal. A compromise. A way for both species to survive. On the flagship, Quan watched the battle with cold calculation. They were winning, but the cost was terrible. He had lost 40 ships. The Reaper wing was down to 70 fighters. Yoon's life signs were critical. And still the Voctor kept coming. "Sir, we should activate the Starkiller," Park Hana urged. "We can't sustain these losses." Quan's hand hovered over the activation control. One button, one choice. End the Voctor forever. Genocide. Victory through extinction. Then Li Minji's voice came through the communication channel. "Admiral, stand down. I've made contact. The Voctor are willing to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Quan said. "After everything they've done?" "After everything we've done," Li Minji replied. "Sir, they're afraid. Just like we were afraid. They attack because they fear being destroyed. But if we destroy them, we prove their fear was justified. We become the very thing they were afraid of." Quan looked at the battle display, looked at the casualty reports, looked at the Starkiller weapon that could end it all. Then he looked at Earth, hanging in space billions of miles away. What kind of humanity would return home if they committed genocide? "All ships, cease fire," Quan ordered. "Stand down weapons. Maintain defensive posture only." The human fleet stopped attacking. The Voctor, receiving orders from the original hive, stopped as well. For the first time in 300 years, the shooting stopped. The negotiation took weeks. Li Minji worked with the original hive to establish communication protocols. The Voctor agreed to withdraw from all occupied systems. In exchange, humanity would not pursue. The swarm would remain in their designated territory. A buffer zone would be established. Both species would survive. Many humans were angry. They wanted revenge. They wanted the Voctor destroyed. But Quan addressed the fleet and made them understand. "We fought for survival," he said. "We won that fight. If we kill them now, we're not fighting for survival anymore. We're just killing. And that makes us no different than what we feared. The treaty was signed. The war ended. Not with glorious victory, but with exhausted compromise. The galaxy slowly began to rebuild. Years later, Quan retired to a small house by the ocean on Earth. He was old now, his hair gray, his hands shaking from old combat injuries. Li Minji visited him. She ran the galaxy's first Xenopsychology Institute, working to prevent future wars through understanding. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Quan asked her. "Letting them live?" "I think we did the human thing," Li Minji said. "We survived. We fought. And when we had the power to destroy, we chose mercy instead. That's what makes us human. Not the fighting, the choice to stop." Park Hannah had dismantled most of her weapons. The Star Killer was sealed away, never to be used. She taught physics now, trying to create instead of destroy. The weapons she had made would haunt her forever, but she was trying to build a better future. Yu never fully recovered from his injuries. He spent his last years training new pilots, teaching them that strength wasn't about being willing to die, but being willing to live. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by the students who loved him. Humanity had seized control when the galaxy lost hope. They had fought with desperate fury. They had pushed the boundaries of warfare and ethics. They had won through strength, courage, and refusing to accept defeat. But in the end, they won because they knew when to stop. Because they chose to be more than just survivors. They chose to be human.